the UK, which is absolutely phenomenal. Maya, can you please tell us a bit about what you do in the UK?
Sure, yeah. So I run an organisation called Safeguarding Animal and Human Survivors of Sexual and Domestic Abuse, known as SAHSDA. And SAHSDA's main services are around training and education, consultancy and research, with our main aim being to raise awareness of the link between interpersonal violence and abuse, animal abuse, cruelty and neglect, and knowing what to do when you suspect abuse of animal, human, or the two together.
Fantastic. Why is this so? Can you tell me why did you? Before we start, I want to make sure that I have a trigger warning for anybody who does get affected by this topic. It is a very sensitive topic, and I understand it might affect many people differently. I know definitely doing my research in this has been just triggering for me, because the more that you learn, the more that you understand that the things that we thought were acceptable are not acceptable. So I really appreciate the fact that you talk about this every single day, and the challenges that must give or add on to you. So I want to say first, appreciate that. So we have our trigger warning, just in case anybody wants to go or it's not comfortable for them. But Maya, can you please tell us, why did you start SAHSDA?
So I've been in the human support sector for over 10 years now. It's 12 years this year. And I've done a variety of different roles in the human support sector. So I've been a frontline specialist worker, so I'm a qualified independent sexual violence advisor. And what that means is I'd work with survivors of sexual abuse, regardless of when that happened and who the perpetrator was. And I would help them access kind of emotional support, but I'd also do practical based support around, say, accessing criminal justice or benefits or housing or anything that really impacted them post the abuse. And I worked with women, men, non-binary survivors as well. So I wasn't just working with one particular group. So I'd worked in that sector for a while, and here's my cat. You wanted to make an appearance. I thought you might. This is Hector.
Oh, hello,
He's
Hector.
8, and really it kind of is an apt point to come in, because once I got my pet, so Hector's 8, I've had him just under 8 years, and my dog Podrick is 5, and I really credit them with SAHSDA even existing. Like, I'm not convinced that without my pets I would have started SAHSDA, because truly understanding the human animal bond came when I got my boys, and understanding kind of the emotional experience of animals and getting into the detail around the impact of abuse and trauma on animals was really an important catalyst for me setting up SAHSDA. And because when I got Podrick, my dog, I became interested in kind of canine behavior and well-being. And the more I kind of learned about that, and the more I connected with kind of behaviorists and trainers, I kind of realized that they didn't understand or weren't really aware of their safeguarding responsibility. So kind of pet professionals' understanding of spotting the signs, recognizing the signs, knowing what to do, and holding that responsibility. So being kind of an active bystander in making sure that person or that animal gets the support that they need. And I really saw that there was a gap there. Veterinary professionals have been having training on domestic abuse and the link with animals for, in the UK at least, quite a few years now. Although there's still a long way to go. But my focus with pet professionals was kind of outside of the traditional veterinary sphere, in those other industries. So behaviorists and trainers, dog groomers, hydrotherapy, anything that is a job related to animals. Because if you're working with animals, you're often working with people. Even if you're in a rescue setting, the idea is to get them into a family, right? So if you're working with an animal, you're often working with a whole family, and that often has children, it might or adults as well. So you're not just working with an animal, And this is something that I think people need to get their minds out of sometimes, is you're not just working for the animal, with the animal, you're working with the whole family. And when you're working with the whole family, you're going into people's homes, or their families are coming into your environment. It's important that you understand and recognize like your responsibility under safeguarding, and kind of you're aware of what to do when you have concerns, if you have concerns.
I
So
know,
that's
like,
came from.
I was just thinking, like, I've been doing training. Well, I've been doing my work with shelter welfare since 2012 and training since 2015. And I've walked into some homes and I was very uncomfortable working with the humans, because even though I didn't have the training that I have now today, through other courses as well, and I've taken like the YWCA and domestic violence course and safety planning for that, which is great. But if I always think if I had known then what I know now is a curse of knowledge, that maybe I could identify things, or like having the resources to know what to do or what to say. Because as a professional, I think, again, most dog people are working with dogs because they don't like people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big thing. And we're like, yay, we're working with animals because we can't stand people. But that's actually why you should like people, is because you can make the difference in the human and the animal's life. And I think people forget that our job as a trainer, behaviorist, or groomer, or hydrotherapist is, or all the other professionals, is that our job is to support the human, to support the pet. And so, again, I'm so happy that you had this course, because I look back in the decade plus of me training, and I think, what could I have done differently to help those people, and especially women and marginalized individuals in these situations?
Exactly. And I think what's really important, for me to when speaking with pet professionals, is I understand that at first it can seem like a lot of responsibility, and it can seem really scary, and there can be a lot of uncertainty around that. But the important thing to remember is we're not asking you to be professionals in safeguarding. We're not asking you to be experts in domestic abuse or coercive control or anything related to that. But we're asking you to look for the signs and then pass that information to the specialists, so that they can step in and come in and create additional safety for that family. So I think that's where people get a bit worried as well. They think that we're going to ask them to be doing more work, as if it's like another thing. But in some, depending on the country, there is actually legislation around everyone's responsibility when it comes to especially children and child protection. That we have to, that is a mandatory requirement that we pass that information on. So yeah, it's really important that people know what to do.
Well, I was just thinking, like, I don't know if I know in Canada is province-wide legislation versus nationwide legislation.
Exactly, yeah.
I think as the States it's the same, because that's the same as our animal welfare laws, is that it is that way. So again, it's understanding the legislation in your province, state, or wherever you live, so in that way you can protect yourself. Because as a trainer behaviorist, when you're walking into these situations, again, you're walking into a person's home, and that could also be very, very discerning as well too. But if you're walking into a person's home and you're noticing the signs of abuse, and you're uncomfortable, and you don't know what to do, it's how do you protect yourself first, and then how do you protect, again, as a professional, our job is to help the animal and help the people. But it's how do you safeguard yourself, and then also safeguard the people involved, because, you could be compromised as well too.
Exactly. Yeah. You're and that was one of the biggest things that so in the training there's a whole section on personal safety for individuals who are going into homes, or who are engaging with families where there may be violence and abuse, because that's was something that really deeply concerned me when I was first having these conversations. Was not only, okay, well, we've got professionals that might have pieces of the puzzle around safeguarding the clients, but also I'm honestly, and I don't mean this, I don't say this flippantly, but I'm almost waiting for a case where someone will get hurt, because that is the reality. I mean, I think the other thing I want people to take away is people don't understand how common domestic abuse is. the problem is that many people don't understand that or recognize that what happened to them is abuse. So we've got lots of people who have been subjected to abuse that if you ask them, oh, he's hang on, he's taking my headphones with me.
That's what cats do. I mean, there's again, I want to go back with how your cat is helping, because the human animal bond is so important, and our cats, as before the conversation, Spark was involved as well too, as he always is. And Marmalade's actually been pacing back and forth. So if you see me looking down and smiling and looking at Marmalade, and so I think when we're talking about these topics, our animals immediately can sense, smell, and see our emotional change, and that's why they're involved in this conversation, is because they're trying to help you and also help me.
Yeah. So what we're saying about it being common was
go back.
So many people walk around, they will label like lots of us have been in relationships where we know that it wasn't right, but we might not label it as abusive. We'll say, it was toxic, or it wasn't healthy. But actually sometimes what we actually mean is that was abusive. We just don't use that language. And the reality is that millions of people globally are subjected to domestic abuse on a daily basis. In the UK alone, it's 2.1 million. In England and Wales alone, so that's only 2 countries within the United Kingdom, 2.1 million. We have, globally, there's just billions of pets, and so what we know is, well, if there's millions of human victim survivors, and lots of people have pets, often more than one pet, we know then that the crossover is massive, because where there's a household and there's abuse and there's a pet, that a pet will be impacted or that pet will be used is just a fact. So I think that's another thing, because people still think of domestic abuse as physical violence. And so if they don't see a bruise, they don't see a cut, they don't see have anyone saying to them that they were hit, they don't think that there's abuse happening, and that's just not the reality. We know the reality is that people's lives are much more marked by what we call it in the UK coercive controlling behaviour, which is the psychological impact and the perpetrator's ability to shrink your world. So are you able to go to work? And if you are able to go to work, maybe you have to check in all the time via text, or maybe they get really funny if you're working with men, or do they follow you to work, or so there's all of that, which isn't technically physical abuse, that would still come under domestic abuse definition, and economic abuse as well. So things like not being maybe you're not allowed, or maybe they ration your money back to you, so you're not allowed access to the bank account, or maybe you're not allowed to take your animal to the vet, or maybe you're not allowed to get your animal parasite prevention because you don't have they don't allow you to have the money and things like that. That's all abuse. That's all comes under economic abuse. So that's the other thing I wanted pet professionals to understand, is many people still think of it as a rare thing. They don't know anyone that it's happened to, and that's just incorrect. Like, all of us will know someone that has been impacted by domestic abuse, whether that was as a child, and then an adult survivor of child domestic abuse, and they've come to you and they're triggered by something, something that's going on. Like, you might not need to do any active safeguarding around that, because maybe there's no risk now, but it's still your responsibility to kind of look for risk, but also understand where that person's coming from in that conversation, and the same with the animal as well, because someone may have rescued a dog who was abused in a household that was domestically abusive. So if you don't understand domestic abuse, you're not then able to understand the trauma and then tailor your approach, to that specific family.
And I was just, I'm not interrupting, am I?
No.
Okay, good. And so while you're talking, there's 2 things that are coming to mind. Number one is, I think a lot of trainers and behaviorists don't have the trauma-informed approach for humans, and they don't have the trauma-informed approach for animals, because a big issue that we're having is that these animals are just considered aggressive, or they're just considered behavior problems, and that they can't be fixed. And the problem that also happens is they probably need behavior medication, which is great. Like, all for medication, however we can get our aids, whether they are physical aids like a cane, or an aid like a Tylenol for us. Same thing for the dog for their mental well-being. I think often we forget that when you're training a dog or you're helping the dog, that if the man or the partner says that they can't take the dog to the vet, that right there is a big red flag for that coercive control. And you're also taking, let's say, I was indicating, like I've had a rescue dog who, well, I didn't have it, but like I was training a rescue dog who was brought into a home that was very controlled home, and you're like, that dog, who also has an unknown history, is now going into a very controlled environment, which is not conducive for their mental well-being. But then rescues are like, well, they got adopted. Seems like a good home. And so this is where it's really, really important to have this knowledge base and to say, here's like a checklist, or here's the resources that I've had through your course, so we can identify this and we can help people through this. And we can also help the dogs, because I think that's a big issue, is that when there is such coercive control, the animals often used as part of that control basis, and they are being threatened to be hit, they are being hit, they are abused. And so it's looking for the signs, let's say, does that cat or that dog or other animals, do they walk in a certain way? Why do they walk in a certain way? I had one animal where they asked me to go away for a little bit because they were on vacation, and I came back and then the dog was sensitive to handling. I put my hand out and the dog cowered from fear, and I turned to them and I was like, did you hit this dog? And they looked really embarrassed, and I was like, has to stop now. And I didn't know what I was doing, but all I know is that dog, as soon as I put my hand up, they did this. And so it's knowing these signs, and I didn't have the knowledge base back then to address it more professionally. And I'm sure that dog is probably still being, it was about 8 years ago, so that dog may not be around. But I bet you that abuse has continued after the training.
Possible, yeah. And what we know is that, statistically, 88% of cases where there's been physical abuse of a child in a home, there's also been animal abuse in the home.
Yeah.
That's just too big of a statistic to ignore. That's significant link. And we know that those who have a history of being cruel or abusive to animals are more likely to become perpetrators of violence, whether that's domestic abuse or a different form of violent behavior, abusive behavior.
And I was also just thinking, recently we just had the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the town just 3 hours north of us was part of the playoffs, and they lost, which is very sad. Canadians in hockey, right? But I was just worried, and also I know that in the UK it's been documented that whenever the UK loses a game or a certain team loses a game, that the rates of IPV, intimate partner violence, increase. And so this is one thing that as a trainer, it's understanding that if you are training around a certain games or training around, a very heated moment in the world, is what are you identifying in the home when you enter it?
Yeah. I think one of the important things to remember about the link between kind of abuse in sports is that it's not the sport that increases the abuse, it's the abuser chooses to abuse potentially more frequently or more violently during that because of additional factors. That's what makes it a more dangerous time for people and animals as well. But yeah, definitely being aware of kind of the external context and how that may influence internal, like family politics or family dynamics, is important. Like you're saying, I think if there's, I hear quite a lot about my behaviourist and trainer friends. They kind of say, well, maybe a couple will come and the woman is really interested and the woman's really on board with the behaviour modification plan and etc. But he's not so much, and he might be speaking over her or undercutting her, or the next time you see them and you ask kind of how is it been going, and she might say like, oh, really good, but he does this and this, and they're all kind of red flags, because what the perpetrator is potentially doing is undermining that person's ability to care for the animal, but then the impact is also on the animal, whether that's intentional or unintentional. There's an impact there. So it's really important that we listen, and we trust our guts as well when something makes us feel uncomfortable. Or it's not to say like in every case that that's definitely abuse, but it's definitely like something I would be looking out for. You know, if they start to say, you know, or if they talk about their partner being like a strict parent, or, you know, someone who is a harsh disciplinarian or something like that, it kind of makes the alarm bells ring a little bit. You know, if they're saying, oh, they've got a temper, or they've got a short fuse, or they get angry really easily, it's kind of not, it's something that would make me concerned potentially about the safety and well-being of the people and the animals in that house.
And I also think how in the animal welfare and animal training industry, like I think it's estimated 78% of the people in the industry are women. And I always have thought, I've walked into many of those situations where the man just won't listen to me because I'm a woman. But the woman is like actively involved and she wants the best for her dog. And the man just kind of sits there and goes, well, you know, you should just dominate the dog. And I'm like, you know, very Susan Milan. And I had to go back to the code of ethics and be like, if you are adopting from this rescue or you are doing this, you are paying me for this ethical code of standard of training. We cannot be using this. Here are the links that I have. I have a whole FAQ list. So we're not going to be using that terminology. So I have to be very firm with that. And it's always, I've had countless men just sit there on the couch or sit there in a chair and watch me train while the woman is like, she's preparing the treats, she's getting the dogs ready, she's got every single thing, and the man is criticizing me. And you know, it's something as a trainer that you walk into countless times because, and so this is identifier of abuse that I didn't even think about. I was just like, you know, again, it's normalized. And so being in Alberta, it's kind of the redneck province of Canada. Yay for that. They're always just like, well, he's an old rancher. And I'm like, well, that doesn't exclude him treating his dog or his cat with kindness. And so, go ahead. I was just going to say,
yes. So most domestic abuse is instigated by someone who wants power and control over someone else. Often that's gendered in dynamics, and it's normally a male perpetrator, female victim survivor. Obviously that can depend on, there can be same-sex kind of victim survivors and perpetrators as well, but at the center is kind of often strict gender roles and strict ideas around what a man is, what a woman is, or what, you know, their roles in society, their roles in the house. And if you are seeing that being mirrored, like when you're going in, like the things you're saying, if there's a misogynistic attitude of the person, or they're kind of refusing to listen to you, or they're putting the person down in front of you, that's all kind of signs. And I think one of the things I teach on the course is how we must try and not be complicit in perpetrators' abuse, because what we can sometimes do is unwillingly participate, which indicates to the survivor that we actually agree with them, which further isolates them. So what we might get is the perpetrator making a joke about, say, their partner's ability to care for the dog. You're the trainer, and it makes you uncomfortable. You might laugh, which is a natural, you know, it's not any judging, it's a natural thing. So if you're nervous, some people laugh, but what that can mean is that what the victim survivor hears is you agreeing with that person. And then that can mean, what that does then is, they then identify you as someone that's not open to be trusted with information because you are complicit. And so that's why in the course we talk about kind of active bystander and how to kind of not look like you're colluding with the perpetrator, but still maintaining kind of that professional stance or face, whatever you want to call it, whilst you're like engaging with the family.
And I'm also I think again that abuse is so normalized, emotional abuse is so normalized that I'm really happy at this course, because I was just thinking while you're talking about them, going back to all the people, like, was I a passive bystander? Did I speak up for the person? Because again, abuse is where they isolate the person from anybody who's external. That's one of the many factors of abuse. So it's kind of, for me, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, do I feel guilty now that I didn't do it as a professional? That I didn't have the knowledge base, and this is why I'm so happy that you had this course, because, that's a natural reaction for a professional to have.
Exactly.
Is like, did I do this properly? Did I stand up for the person? And now that I know what to do, this is what I can do differently. And I think that's why everybody should take your course. I should win the lottery and take all your courses. But do you have any discount codes for the courses?
Yeah, so we're releasing discount codes today. So if I just explain a little bit about what the course is, how people can access it, then we can talk about discount codes. There's different formats of the course. So the course is Understanding Safeguarding for Pet Professionals. If you do the qualification, it's the iPet Network Level 2 Award in Understanding Safeguarding for Pet Professionals, and that is a regulated qualification by Ofqual, which is kind of the regulating body in the UK for formal qualifications. So it's a an approved proper qualification, and if you do that, you get an official certificate. You get access to the safeguarding policies and procedures template document that all organizations should have. So I've made one that you can just kind of download and put your name, your organization in. And I've also made a safeguarding certified logo, so that if you do the qualification, you can put that on your marketing materials on your website. So you can come and do the qualification, or on the same day, it's all of the same content. So you can either do it as the qualification, or you can do it as just a CPD type course. So the price differs depending on which one you use.
Sure.
Anyone who comes on the course, regardless of what they choose, will get access to the Facebook group, which has kind of, you have access to me, and there's additional resources going to be put in there, probably like little freebies and things. So if you want to do the qualification, it's normally £250. I'm sorry, I don't know what that conversion is.
That's about $500, which is very reasonable for an off-call course. And
it's a 7-hour course. So at the moment we're running it at 50% off, so it's now 150. So I'll say the code, but we can also add it maybe as a comment.
I'll add it. What I'll do is I'll add it as a comment, but I can do a post about this as well.
Oh, great, cool. So it's normally £250, but now it's £150 for the next 2 dates. So we've got one running on July the 22nd, which is a Monday, and one on August the 11th, which is a Sunday, because I appreciate people work different days and then might prefer a weekend date. And then so that's if you want to do the qualification. Same dates, same times. If you only want to come and do your kind of CPD version, you'll get a certificate of completion, but it won't be a qualification. But that's only £99 at the moment. Okay. And I'll put the codes, like you say, we'll put the codes in there. And the course is for any pet professional, except vets. So I'm really sorry, vets. But that's because there is going to be specific training for vets. And because of the medical element of veterinary science and what they do for their job, they need something slightly different than this course. So this course is for behaviourists, trainers, groomers, rescue workers, anyone who works with an animal in kind of a professional setting that's not kind of a super medical one, I would say. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else about the course. And it covers kind of definitions. So we look at what is child abuse, what is domestic abuse, what is animal abuse. So what is that? When we talk about that, what does that mean? Like, what are the examples? We look at what to do if we kind of the indicators of abuse. We look at what to do if you suspect abuse. So different avenues for different people. So for example, if there are children, there are things you must do if the children are under 18. If they're an adult with care and support needs, so if they're an adult with being supported by, say, a local authority or social services, so they might have, say, a disability, or they might have a mental health condition that needs additional support. There's safeguarding thing that you have to do for them specifically. And then also, if you know, there's adults that don't have children and don't have care and support needs. So we go through all of the different nuances. We also go through personal safety. So you and I were talking, I think just before we came on, about personal safety of pet professionals when engaging, you know, with families. So we look at that as well. And we do touch on kind of a trauma-informed response, and kind of around disclosures and managing disclosures from children and adults. So it's a really comprehensive day course that covers a lot of basis, and you get a lot of the kind of additional things if you do the qualification as well, which is useful.
The question I have for you is, obviously I'm in a different time zone, and I really appreciate you being you're 7 hours ahead of me, so I really appreciate all your patience, because I know you need to eat your dinner or your tea, as you guys say. But let's say I want to do the course, because I'm all very excited about this course, and I'm
Sure.
you know, I want the off qual, but due to the time difference, I couldn't attend the call. Exactly. So what is the option that I could do, or people or professionals that are in Canada or USA that they could do as well too? Because I know there's so many people who want to do your course.
Yeah. So there's kind of two different options. One is, if I can find enough people in the same time zone, I will run it in their time zone. So I'm happy to do that. The other option is I'm looking at creating an e-learning version, so it's accessible anywhere, anytime. That one, it's impossible to do that one as a qualification, just because of the regulation. Because with Ofqual and IPET Network, who are the awarding body, I'm scrutinized, so everything is quality assured. They do audit checks on me, and so we have to make sure that, like, the people who are doing the course are the people who they say they are, you know, so we're not giving certificates to people who haven't done the course in its live capacity. So so there will be an e-learning version which people will be able to access, but it won't be the quali. And then, as I said, if I can get you know, numbers and dates to run one in a certain time zone, then I can do that, and we can do that as a qualification. It's just maybe we'll need to do that maybe
in the future
poll or something. Yeah, it'll be in the future, but I'm just trying to think, like, how can we get like a group of people together. I'm trying to think, how do we group people so that
well, I think that you and I could talk about that
sure,
later, because again, I know there's so many people in Canada and the USA who are just super keen on your course, and it is so important, because when you're walking into people's homes, domestic abuse or any kind of abuse is just so prevalent, and so it's just where we can have the tools in our toolkit to know what to do and how to help the dog who has gone through the trauma and help the people who've gone through the trauma.
Yeah, and I think the thing is with homes is people think, well, if it's only an abusive home if I walk in and there's holes in the wall, or there's holes in the door, or there's feces on the floor, and that's not the case. Like, just because the house is clean and doesn't have a hole in the wall does not mean there isn't abuse happening in the home, and there can be other subtleties that in the environment that indicate there's potential abuse, rather than just kind of the stereotype. So we look at that in the course as well.
And I think that's really important, because I think, again, like, I don't want to keep you, because I don't want to go over. We're at 3 minutes over time, so I'm very mindful about that. So again, it's, you know, there's financial abuse, or there's emotional abuse, there's spiritual abuse, and there's so many different things. And so, like you were mentioning before, is like, how can we help support the person who is actively involved in the dog's care or the cat's care? Because I do cats as well, because cats are awesome. And so it's where, how can we support the people and support ourselves? And so I'm so happy that you have this course.
Yeah, thank you. It's the first of its kind, so I'm really pleased to be able to offer it. And in the one in a few weeks' time is the first trial run, I suppose. You would say. So I'm really looking forward to to seeing how people respond to it.
Well, I mean, the response that I've seen online is just enormous already. So I'm very happy and I'm very grateful that you're doing this, because I know that you just started this last year or this year.
So I've kind of done bits on and off for about a year, maybe a bit more, but SAHSDA was set up and started from January 2024. So yeah, I've not really been going formally for a very long time.
But I mean, you have over a decade of experience in the
Yeah.
field as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any last minute notes that I can to talk about before I let you go to eat your dinner?
Yeah, my main kind of end thing I always do is really a call to action for people, because what I want people to understand is they might only hold a really small piece of information, and all these other services may have like 99% of the puzzle and you hold that 1%, but that might hold something that's really, really key to someone's safety. And so it's to recognize that we do have the power together to prevent violence and abuse and save lives. And I think sometimes people think that that's above them, like that's something that's big, but really that's honestly what we're here to do is save lives, especially when we look at the prevalence of kind of animal lives that we're losing related to domestic abuse.
And that's one thing I think, I forget the stat. I did it in May about there's a certain percentage of animals that are killed due to domestic violence, and I think it was like 40% or something like that.
I've never heard a statistic, but I'm a bit wary of statistics.
Okay,
because
fantastic.
I always feel like they're too low. Because the reality is we're never going to be able to know, because the problem with animal abuse is we can get rid of an animal much easier than a human being. And we just won't know ever. I just think it will be in the hundreds of thousands, every year.
And I think this is what people forget, is that they forget that they are quite literally saving the life of the people, and they're saving the life of the animal, because if you don't act, whether it's a physical life or it could also be an emotional life as well too.
Exactly.
And of the dog and the person, because again, the dog could be living in learned helplessness due to the stress of the daily activities. And I think this is one thing people forget, is that the cat or the dog could be just running away in fear and in avoidance behaviors nonstop. And that's when they develop these chronic conditions and they get sick, and then they die as well too.
Exactly.
And because they're also not allowed to get the help that they need to address the chronic condition. So there's so many things that I wish we had a bazillion hours to talk, because there's so much I want to talk to you about. But I'm just so grateful that you joined us for the live.
Thank you very much for asking me, and I hope to see some people on the course.
Yeah, I'll definitely be there for sure. All right. I know that I've been sharing this in a few groups, and I know that people have been watching, and I really appreciate your time. So if you just hold on to.
Do we have any questions?
No, I've been checking. I've been checking constantly. 1 second. I will just check again before we have shares, but we don't.
We can share my email address as well if people do have questions after.
Yeah,
they can
for sure.
Put me an email.
I think that'd be great. Is if you can send me the contact information, then I can potentially get people more engaged. No, there are no comments that I can see, but I know that people are very keen about this. So what you can do is to send me an email, and I'll post it into like a nice little poster after this.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much.
All right. If you just hang on just a moment, we'll end the live stream, and so I'll say thank you to everybody for your time.
Thanks.